Welcome to Ethical Point. This is the explainer, where we take those really complex, heavy philosophical concepts and just completely break them down into clear, practical frameworks. So if you're an aspiring civil servant, gearing up for the UPSC GS Paper 4, or honestly just someone fascinated by how philosophy collides with public service, you are in the exact right place. I'm your mentor for today, and joining me is my co-host, who's going to be playing the role of our resident skeptic and student.
That's right. I'm basically here to question absolutely everything, demand real-world evidence, and make sure these high-level theories actually make sense on the ground.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. Today, we are tackling a really foundational idea from Immanuel Kant that perfectly captures that everyday friction between just following the rules and actually doing the right thing. Okay, so looking at this quote, it says, "In law, a man is guilty when he violates the rights of others. In ethics, he is guilty if he only thinks of doing so." I gotta be honest, as a skeptic, this sounds a little intense. I mean, why should my inner thoughts matter to anyone if I'm not actually breaking any laws? If I don't act on a bad thought, shouldn't I be totally in the clear?
Well, let's dive into this, because that exact question, that's the trap that catches so many people, especially in public administration. Kant is pointing out this massive gap between simply avoiding punishment and actually having true moral character.
So, here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll welcome you to the core concepts, contrast law versus inner ethics, explore real-world moral dilemmas and public service conundrums, and then finish up with a UPSC Mains answer guide and a 3-step decision framework. All right, Section 1, defining the basics. Let's set the stage. Before we climb the heights of ethical philosophy, we need to understand the absolute baseline of societal behavior.
Right, let's get absolute clarity on what we actually mean by legal rules. Let's not assume anything here.
Fair enough. Legal compliance means adhering strictly to external rules and focusing entirely on external actions to avoid violating the rights of others.
Okay, so it's completely outward-facing.
Precisely. Let's take a hard pause here to break this down. In layman's terms, legal compliance just means you are doing the bare minimum required to not get arrested or sued. It is entirely about your external actions. The law doesn't care if you secretly want to steal your neighbor's car, you know? As long as you don't actually break the window and hotwire it, you're compliant. Okay, that makes sense. The law is a boundary line. But moving into Section 2, law versus inner ethics, how does that baseline compare to true morality? If legal compliance is just the bare minimum, what does the rest of the picture actually look like?
That is exactly where Kant's philosophy steps in.
This brilliantly illustrates the concept. Think of law as the floor of society. It's built on legal compliance and external rules. It's the foundation we stand on so society doesn't collapse. But ethics? Ethics is the ceiling. It's about the mind, the heart, your conscience. It's about integrity, purity of intention, and moral responsibility. The law judges what you do, but ethics judges who you are. Wow, the stark contrast there is super interesting, because this means an act might completely avoid legal punishment just because it was never executed, but internally, it still represents a massive moral deficiency.
You hit the nail right on the head. Imagine someone doesn't take a bribe simply because they noticed a security camera pointing at them. Technically, they are legally compliant, but ethically, they are completely bankrupt because their purity of intention is basically zero. Their conscience wasn't the judge, the camera was.
Let's define one of those absolutely crucial terms, because if you're taking notes, this is a massive mains exam tip. Integrity is the strict consistency of your internal thoughts and your external actions. So in layman's terms, your inside matches your outside. Exactly. If you are behaving well simply out of fear of getting caught, you lack true integrity. Your external action might look good, but your internal thought is, man, I wish I could get away with this. That inconsistency, that means integrity is entirely absent. Okay, and moral responsibility is the ethical duty that goes completely beyond basic legal compliance, demanding good motives and good ends. So to summarize this, ethics evaluates your character and your internal intentions. It's not just about avoiding handcuffs.
Spot on.
The law only steps in when rights are actually violated and real harm is caused. But moral responsibility demands that your motives are pure from the very beginning. It's a much, much heavier burden. Which brings us to a highly provocative question we hear all the time. If it's not illegal, does that make it okay?
Oh, that's a dangerous question. Because people use that exact excuse to justify some seriously terrible behavior.
They absolutely do.
And that's exactly why we need to pivot from abstract 18th century Kantian theory into the modern, practical friction we face every single day.
Right. Let's jump into Section 3, Real-World Moral Dilemmas. How does this philosophy hold up against things like AI, complex corporate regulations, and the digital age?
Incredibly well, actually. Precisely because our modern systems have a massive blind spot.
Here is the big danger of the modern mindset. Relying solely on complex regulatory frameworks and digital terms of service to dictate right and wrong.
Yeah, we kind of just assume that if the system allows it, it must be fine.
Yes. And we see this in modern corporate leadership all the time. Think of executives structuring these massive bonuses tied to unethical shortcuts, or legally silencing whistleblowers through incredibly complex non-disclosure agreements. Laws and algorithms cannot monitor every single human intention. When we treat the law as the ceiling instead of the floor, legal loopholes are actively hunted and exploited without a second thought.
Okay, I see your point. But looking at digital age friction, like sharing misinformation, manipulating algorithms, false equivalence, manipulating an algorithm to get more views isn't always explicitly prohibited by law. It's really just playing the game, right?
Right, so the crucial point here is ethical maturity demands internal self-regulation. The law is way too slow to catch up with every new algorithmic trick or viral piece of misinformation. If individuals, especially corporate leaders, the media, and public servants, don't regulate their own intentions and think about their impact on society, the whole system just falls apart, even if everything is technically legal.
And this friction gets even more intense in administration. Let's move into Section 4, Public Service Conundrums. Yeah, because public servants are granted immense power, and obviously with that power comes immense temptation.
Exactly. And that requires self-accountability. This means using your own conscience as your inner judge to regulate your intentions and their impact on others. To use a really simple ancient analogy, think of your mind acting as a charioteer. You have to actively control and rein in those wild, selfish inner motives before they ever turn into external actions.
So you're basically acting as your own personal police force before you even make a decision.
That's a great layman's way to look at it. You can't just sit around waiting for an anti-corruption bureau to tap you on the shoulder and say, you've crossed a line. Your inner charioteer has to draw that line first.
And these are some painfully realistic scenarios of public servant ethical failures. Denial of services without directly asking for a bribe. Manipulating tenders using legal loopholes. Violating impartiality while technically remaining legal.
It happens all the time. An official might intentionally delay a file, completely frustrating a citizen, secretly hoping that citizen will spontaneously offer a bribe to speed things up. The official hasn't explicitly broken the law by asking for money, but ethically, they are completely culpable.
Same with the tenders. They might follow all the procedural rules on paper to the letter, but they've manipulated the criteria beforehand, so only their favored contractor can win. They completely bypassed the law, but violated ethics.
Exactly. And what is the ultimate casualty when that happens? Public trust. That is the faith built in public institutions by leaders who actually demonstrate institutional integrity and purity of thought.
Because if the public knows officials are just out there finding legal loopholes to be corrupt, that trust is instantly shattered.
Completely. Transforming the inner moral world is literally the only way a civil servant can truly build and maintain this vital public trust. You have to be pure in intention, not just compliant in your paperwork. Okay, Section 5, UPSC Mains Answer Guide. Let's make all of this theory highly actionable for your exams.
Awesome, let's see the blueprint.
All right, get your pens ready for this one. Structuring a 10-marker. Step 1, Introduction. Define that ethics goes way beyond external actions to include inner intentions.
Keep it punchy. Step 2, the core body. This is where you bring in Kant's quote. Clearly contrast the law, which judges external actions and rights violations, against ethics, which judges internal motives and character. Use the real-world public service examples we just discussed, like tender manipulation, to really prove your point.
And step 3, the conclusion. Clearly state that laws are the floor and ethics is the ceiling.
That right there is a clean, high-scoring exam blueprint. It shows the examiner you grasp both the deep philosophical theory and the harsh administrative reality.
Now to wrap things up, let's translate Kant into a practical revision guide. Section 6, the 3-step decision framework.
This is how we actually apply Kant when we close our textbooks and walk out into the real world.
Exactly. Here is the way forward. Step 1, cultivate integrity of thoughts. Make sure your inside actually matches your outside. Step 2, set higher standards of conduct. Please don't just settle for the legal minimum. Step 3, promote self-regulation.
Let your own conscience be your inner judge. Because as we've seen, laws only punish actual harm after it already happens. Yes, laws punish the harm, but ethics prevents it from happening in the first place. These 3 steps are the ultimate remedy for the limitations of merely lawful conduct.
Which leaves us with one deeply personal question for you to consider. When navigating your career, will you settle for simply obeying the law, or will you rise to lead with true inner purity?
It's a choice every single leader has to make at some point. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer at Ethical Point. We really hope this framework not only helps you ace your exams, but also helps you build a deeply unshakable moral compass. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you in the next explainer.